Welcome back to Night Visitors. Tonight we're heading to Alaska to share 6 of the most disturbing horror stories from America's coldest state. These stories come from regular people: a dental hygienist, a coffee shop worker, a janitor, a carpenter, a building repairman, and a wildlife photographer. Each person saw something in Alaska's wild, lonely places that they'll never forget. These are their real stories, told in their own words, about the scary things that happen to them in a state where you can be hundreds of miles from the nearest town and where winter darkness lasts for months. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next scary story. Now let's hear what happened to these 6 people in the frozen wilderness of Alaska, where help is far away and strange things hide in the cold and dark. My name is Jasmine Rivera, and I've been a dental hygienist in Anchorage, Alaska for 7 years. I clean teeth, take x-rays, and make small talk with patients while their mouths are full of instruments. It's steady work with good benefits, and I'm good at making nervous patients feel comfortable. I've handled everything from kids with their first cavity to elderly folks who haven't seen a dentist in decades. But 6 months ago, my husband cheated on me with his coworker, and since then, I haven't slept through a single night. Every time I close my eyes, I see the text messages I found on his phone. I tried therapy. I tried pills. Nothing worked. And that's when I met Walter Hayes, an elderly patient who told me about a doctor who could make painful memories disappear. I thought he was offering me a miracle. I didn't know he was handing me a nightmare. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Walter came in for his regular cleaning. He was 73, a Vietnam veteran with kind eyes and shaky hands. I'd been cleaning his teeth for 3 years, and he always told me stories about his time in the war. But that morning, something was different. He seemed lighter, happier. When I asked how he'd been, he smiled and said, "Best I've felt in 50 years, Jasmine. Haven't had a single flashback in 2 months." I was surprised. Walter had severe PTSD. He'd told me about the nightmares, the panic attacks in grocery stores, the sound of fireworks sending him back to the jungle. "That's wonderful," I said, adjusting the overhead light. "Did you find a new therapist?" "Better than that," Walter said. "Found a doctor up in Fairbanks, Dr. Raymond Chen, does experimental memory therapy. He removed the bad memories completely. I can still tell you I was in Vietnam. I remember the facts. But the fear is gone. The pain is gone. It's like it happened to someone else." My hands stopped motes. Ving! I looked down at Walter, his mouth open, waiting for me to continue. "He can remove specific memories?" "Every traumatic one," Walter said when I moved the instrument away. 3 sessions, and I'm a new man. Best $5,000 I ever spent. I finished the cleaning on autopilot. Before Walter left, I asked for Dr. Chen's information. Walter pulled out a business card from his wallet. The card was plain white with black text: Dr. Raymond Chen, Experimental Memory Therapy. There was an address in Fairbanks, no website, just a phone number. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat in my empty apartment, my ex-husband had taken most of the furniture, and stared at the card. $5,000 was all the money I had saved. But what was I saving it for? A life where I couldn't sleep? Where every quiet moment filled with memories of betrayal? I called the number the next morning. A smooth, calm voice answered. "Dr. Chen speaking." I explained who I was, how I'd heard about him from Walter. Dr. Chen listened patiently, then said, "I specialize in removing traumatic memories using advanced neuroscience techniques. The process is completely safe. 1 session is usually sufficient for relationship trauma. Can you come to Fairbanks for a consultation?" "How much?" I asked. $5,000 per session, cash only. I don't take insurance. This procedure isn't FDA approved yet, so it has to be private." I should have heard the warning in those words. Instead, I heard hope. 3 days later, I drove 5 hours north to Fairbanks on my day off. The address led me to an industrial area near the airport, warehouses and storage facilities. Nothing medical. I almost turned around. But then I saw the building, a converted warehouse with a small sign that said Advanced Memory Solutions. Inside, it looked like a real medical clinic. White walls, sterile floors, examination rooms with proper equipment. Dr. Chen met me in the lobby. He was about 45, Asian American, with glasses and a professional smile. He looked like any doctor I'd seen before. "Welcome, Jasmine," he said, shaking my hand. "Let me show you what we do here." He led me to his office and showed me brain scans, before and after images of neural pathways. He had 3-ring binders full of testimonials from happy clients, combat veterans who could finally sleep, abuse survivors who felt free, people who'd lost children and wanted to stop grieving. "How does it work?" I asked. "It's a combination approach," Dr. Chen explained. "Hypnosis to access the specific memory, electromagnetic stimulation to disrupt the neural pathways, and a proprietary drug cocktail that prevents the memory from reconsolidating. You'll remember the facts. You'll know you were married, that it ended, but the emotional pain will be gone, like watching a movie about someone else's life." "Is it permanent?" "Completely," he said. "The memory pathway is erased. It can't come back." I thought about Walter's smile, about sleeping through the night, about maybe feeling normal again. "I'll do it," I said. Dr. Chen had me sign consent forms, pages and pages of legal language about experimental procedures and possible side effects. I should have read them carefully. Instead, I signed quickly, then handed him $5,000 in cash from my purse. The procedure room looked like something from a hospital, a medical chair that reclined, monitors everywhere, cabinets full of equipment. Dr. Chen had me lie back and attached electrodes to my head, small sticky pads at my temples, forehead, and behind my ears. Then he started an IV in my left arm. "The first injection will help you relax," he said. "Then I'll guide you into a hypnotic state. You'll tell me about the traumatic memory in detail, and I'll target it specifically. You'll be unconscious for the electromagnetic portion. The whole process takes about 3 hours." The drug hit my system fast. The room got soft and warm. "Doctor," Chen's voice became the only thing I could focus on. "Tell me about the day you found out," he said. And I did. I told him everything, finding my husband's phone, reading the messages, the confrontation, the divorce. Every horrible detail spilled out of me while Dr. Chen took notes. Then his voice got distant and everything went black. I woke up in the chair 3 hours later. Dr. Chen was removing the electrodes. "How do you feel?" he asked. I felt strange, fuzzy, like waking up from a long nap. "Okay, I think." "Think about your ex-husband," Dr. Chen said. "Tell me what comes to mind." I searched my memory. I could remember being married. I could remember the facts, his name, what he looked like, that we'd gotten divorced. But when I tried to feel something about it, there was nothing. No anger, no pain, just neutral information, like remembering what I had for lunch last Tuesday. "It's gone," I whispered. "The hurt is gone." Dr. Chen smiled. "Give it a few days to settle. You'll be fine. Call me if you have any concerns." I drove home in a daze. That night, I slept for 9 hours straight. No nightmares, no waking up at 3 a.m. replaying painful scenes, just deep, peaceful sleep. For 2 weeks, I felt incredible. I went to work smiling. I didn't flinch when someone mentioned my ex-husband. I felt free for the first time in months. I even thought about calling Dr. Chen to thank him again. Then Walter Hayes missed his dental appointment. Walter never missed appointments. He was punctual and reliable. When he didn't show up and didn't call, I checked his file and called his emergency contact, his nephew, Marcus. "Walter's in the hospital," Marcus said. His voice sounded strained. "Providence Psychiatric. He had some kind of mental breakdown 3 days ago. They don't know what caused it." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He just stopped functioning, stopped talking, stopped recognizing anyone. The doctors say he's lost all memory function. He can't even remember how to feed himself." I visited Walter that afternoon. The moment I saw him, I knew something was terribly wrong. He was curled up in his hospital bed, staring at the wall, completely nonverbal. A nurse was trying to get him to eat, but he didn't seem to understand what a spoon was. His eyes were empty. The kind, sharp man I'd known was gone. "Does he recognize anyone?" I asked the nurse. "No one," she said sadly. "Not even his own children. It's like his entire memory just erased itself." My hands started shaking. Walter had mentioned having multiple sessions with Dr. Chen. 3 sessions, he'd said. What if the procedure hadn't just removed his PTSD? What if it had kept going, erasing everything? I called Dr. Chen from the hospital parking lot. When he answered, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Walter Hayes is in a psychiatric hospital," I said. "He's lost all his memories, every single one. What did you do to him?" There was a pause. Then Dr. Chen's voice came back, still smooth but colder now. "Some clients have adverse reactions. It's clearly stated in the consent forms you both signed. I'm legally protected." "Protected?" My voice rose. "You destroyed his mind. I provided a service he requested and paid for. What happened after is unfortunate, but not my responsibility. I suggest you don't contact me again, Jasmine." He hung up. That night I started noticing something strange. I was looking at photos on my phone when I realized I couldn't remember my sister's wedding. I'd been her maid of honor last year. I could see the photos. But when I tried to remember being there was nothing. Just a blank space where the memory should be. I told myself it was stress. But the next day I couldn't remember my college graduation. The day after that, random memories from my childhood were just gone. I went to my doctor in a panic. She ran neurological tests, ordered an MRI, checked everything. Physically, my brain was fine, but the memories kept disappearing. "It's like watching myself evaporate," I told her. "Pieces of my life are just vanishing." She couldn't explain it. She referred me to a neurologist, but the earliest appointment was 6 weeks away. By then, I'd lost entire years of my childhood. I drove back to Fairbanks to confront Dr. Chen. The warehouse district looked different in late afternoon. Abandoned, industrial, cold. When I got to his building, it was locked. The sign was gone. I peered through the windows and saw empty rooms. Everything was gone. A man working at the warehouse next door saw me and walked over. "You looking for that doctor?" "Yes," I said. "Where did he go?" "Cleared out 3 days ago, middle of the night, moving truck, the whole operation. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. 3 days ago, right after I called him about Walter. I broke a window and climbed inside. The clinic was gutted, all the equipment gone, but file cabinets remained. I opened them with shaking hands and found folders. 23 clients, including Walter and me. Detailed notes about memory erasure, progression charts, incident reports. Several files had red stamps that said adverse reaction. I photographed everything with my phone and took the files to the Anchorage Police Department. The detective listened to my story and looked through the files. "We'll open an investigation," he said. "But without Dr. Chen's location or physical evidence beyond these papers, there's not much we can do immediately. These consent forms you signed are pretty ironclad." "He's destroying people's minds," I said. "I believe you, but proving criminal intent is difficult when patients signed up voluntarily." Over the next month, I lost more memories. My childhood home was a blank. My mother's face was gone. I had to look at photos to remember what she looked like. I was becoming a shell of who I'd been. I called every client from Dr. Chen's files. 7 responded. All of them were experiencing the same thing, memory loss beyond what they'd paid to forget. One woman, Dorothy, told me her family had paid Chen to erase her memories of her daughter's overdose death. Now Dorothy didn't remember having a daughter at all. "My son says it's better this way," Dorothy said quietly. "Says I'm finally happy. But I feel like I'm missing something important, and I don't even know what it is." I realized some families had wanted this. Total erasure. They weren't going to help us because the results were what they'd secretly hoped for. I spent weeks going through Chen's research notes. He believed traumatic memories were connected to all memories, like pulling one thread and watching the whole sweater unravel. The procedure didn't just erase the target memory, it destabilized the entire memory structure. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. Chen had tested the procedure on himself first. His notes from 2015 described killing his own daughter in a drunk driving accident. His notes from 2016 showed he'd erased his memory of her. His notes from 2017 mentioned being childless. He'd erased his daughter from his own mind. I tracked his real identity through old university records attached to the files. His name wasn't Raymond Chen, it was Raymond Park. He'd been fired from a Seattle research lab in 2014 for conducting unauthorized experiments on patients. I found a pattern in his work history. Chen operated under different names, set up clinics in remote areas, treated clients for 6 to 12 months, then vanished when people started having complications. Alaska, Montana, Wyoming. Always places with military bases where PTSD patients were desperate. The FBI finally got involved. They traced his financial records and found hundreds of victims over 10 years, dozens with permanent cognitive damage. My memory loss kept getting worse. I showed up at my ex-husband's house one night, confused, thinking we were still married. He called my sister, who started keeping a closer watch on me. I had to write everything down. My address, my job, basic facts about my life, because I couldn't trust my memory anymore. But I could still think clearly in the moment, and I could still use Chen's notes. He always relocated near military bases where PTSD patients were desperate. Fort Wainwright was 40 miles from Fairbanks. If Chen was still in Alaska, that's where he'd be. I drove to Fairbanks and spent 3 days watching areas near the base. On the third day, I saw him. Same man, different hair color, entering a warehouse with a new sign. Advanced Trauma Solutions. I followed him inside, a hidden camera in my purse. I pretended to be a new client seeking treatment for PTSD from a car accident I invented. Chen was charming again, explaining the procedure, offering me an introductory session for $3,000. He didn't recognize me. I'd lost 20 pounds from stress. My hair was different. I looked like a stranger. I let him go through his whole pitch. Then I said, "Do you remember Jasmine Rivera?" His smile faltered. "Should I? You erased my memories 6 weeks ago. Now I'm losing everything. My childhood, my education, my entire life is disappearing." Chen's expression went cold. "You signed a consent form." So did Walter Hayes. He's in a psychiatric hospital. He can't remember his own name. "People want to forget," Chen said. "I provide a service. They consent. It's not my fault if you destroy their minds." I pulled out my phone, showing him the FBI contact information. "I know who you are, Raymond Park. I know about Seattle. I know about your daughter." For the first time, he looked uncertain. "My daughter? You killed her. Then you erased her from your memory. That's why you think this is okay. You can't remember the people you've hurt." Chen's face went pale, then angry. "You're recording this." "The FBI is outside," I lied. "They've bewildered in listening to everything." He moved fast, grabbing a syringe from a drawer. "Then I'll make you forget this conversation. Make you forget everything. You'll be too damaged to testify." And he lunged at me. I grabbed his wrist, and we struggled, crashing into equipment. The electromagnetic stimulation machine toppled. I smashed his head against it hard, and he went down, blood on his temple. I ran outside, screaming for help. I'd been bluffing about the FBI, but the commotion brought warehouse workers. Someone called 911. When police arrived, they found Chen conscious but injured, surrounded by his equipment and files. His lawyer tried to argue he couldn't stand trial because he didn't remember his crimes. Psychiatric evaluation confirmed Chen had massive memory damage from self-experimentation. He genuinely didn't remember most of his victims, his daughter's death, or why he'd started this horrible work. The legal battle lasted months. Ethicists debated whether someone could be prosecuted for crimes they didn't remember. In the end, the judge ruled that Chen's current mental state didn't erase his past actions. His memory loss didn't absolve him. It made him more dangerous because he couldn't learn from what he'd done. Chen was convicted on 47 counts: fraud, practicing medicine without a license, reckless endangerment, 35 years in federal prison. I testified at his sentencing. By then, I'd lost 5 years of memories permanently. Neurologists had stabilized me with medication. The memory loss stopped progressing, but I'd never get those years back. I'd never remember my childhood dog, my high school graduation, my wedding day. Those pieces of me were gone forever. Chen showed no remorse during sentencing. He genuinely couldn't remember the people he'd hurt. The judge said, "Your amnesia doesn't absolve you. It makes you more dangerous because you can't even learn from your crimes." I started a support group for Chen's victims. 22 people came to the first meeting. We shared stories and helped each other document our lives so we would not lose more. We became each other's memory. 3 years later, I still work as a dental hygienist in Anchorage. I live a quiet life. But I don't remember my sister's face. I have to look at photos. I don't remember my childhood home. When patients ask if I'm married, I honestly don't know. I wear a simple silver bracelet now with important information engraved. My name, my address, my sister's phone number. I keep the photo of Chen's arrest on my phone as proof I fought back. Because sometimes I forget I'm the reason he's in prison. I forget I saved myself and 24 other people. I forget I was brave. The most disturbing part isn't that someone can steal your memories. It's that you might not remember fighting to keep them. Every morning I read my journals and wonder if the person I'm reading about is really me, or just a stranger whose life I inherited. The woman I was before Chen is gone, erased as completely as if she'd never existed at all. And I'll never know for certain who I really am, because the memories that made me are gone, and I'm left holding photographs of a life I can't remember living. Some wounds heal, but some wounds remove the person who got hurt in the first place. And that's the cruelest kind of damage, when you survive but lose yourself completely, and you'll never even remember who you used to be. My name is Tasha Reeves, and I've been working as a barista at Glacier Grounds Coffee Shop in Juneau, Alaska for 3 years now. It's not glamorous. I steam milk, clean espresso machines, and smile at tourists who complain about our prices. But the tips help pay for my online ecology classes at University of Alaska, and the shop sits just 2 miles from Mendenhall Glacier, which means on my days off, I can hike out there with my camera and document the ice for my climate change project. I've photographed that glacier maybe 60 times, watched it shrink back year after year, seen the blue ice retreat and expose dark rock underneath. But what I found embedded in that ice last July changed everything I thought I knew about glaciers. They're not just frozen water. They're time capsules. And sometimes they're graveyards. I grew up in Juneau, so Mendenhall Glacier has always been part of my life. As a kid, my dad would take me hiking there, and I'd press my hands against the ice and feel how cold it was, how ancient. When I started my ecology classes 2 years ago, my professor assigned us a long-term documentation project on climate change effects, and I immediately chose the glacier. Every week off, I'd hike the West Glacier Trail with my Nikon, photograph the ice face from the same angles, measure how far it had retreated. I had spreadsheets, comparison photos going back 18 months, calculations on melt rates. My professor said it was some of the best undergraduate field work she'd seen. The summer tourists love Mendenhall. They come off cruise ships, ride buses out to the visitor center, take selfies with the ice in the background. Most of them don't really look at it, not the way I do. They don't notice the crevasses opening wider, the ice caves collapsing, the meltwater rivers running heavier each year. They just see pretty blue ice and think it'll be there for hours. But I know better. The glacier is dying, retreating up the valley at about 200 feet per year. In my lifetime, it might disappear completely. July 23rd was my day off, and the weather was perfect. 65 degrees, clear sky, barely any wind. I packed my camera bag, 2 water bottles, trail mix, and my field notebook. The hike to the glacier face takes about 90 minutes from the trailhead, up through the spruce forest and across the rocky moraine where the ice used to reach a century ago. I'd made this hike dozens of times, knew every switchback, every boulder. When I got to my usual photography spot, a flat outcrop about 50 yards from the ice face, I set up my tripod and started taking my standard documentation shots. The glacier looked different than 2 weeks ago. There'd been a heat wave, temperatures in the 70s, and the ice had melted back another 15 feet or so. Fresh blue ice was exposed, and a new crevasse had opened on the western side, this dark crack running vertically up the face. I zoomed in with my telephoto lens to photograph the crevasse detail. That's when I saw it. Something dark in the ice. At first, I thought it was just rock or sediment. Glaciers pick up debris as they move, drag boulders and dirt along with them. But this looked different. The shape was wrong. Too regular. I adjusted my focus, zoomed in closer. It was fabric. Dark fabric, like a jacket or coat, frozen in the ice about 20 feet up the face. My hands started shaking on the camera. I took maybe 30 rapid-fire shots, zooming in as far as my lens would go. Through the viewfinder, I could see it clearly now. Definitely clothing. And beneath it, something that looked like... I didn't want to think it, but I couldn't stop thinking it. A body. There was a body in the glacier. I fumbled for my phone and called 911. My voice came out weird and high-pitched. I'm at Mendenhall Glacier, the West Glacier Trail overlook. There's something in the ice. I think it's a person, a dead person. The dispatcher stayed calm, asked me to describe exactly what I saw, confirmed my location. Within 40 minutes, 2 park rangers arrived, then Alaska State Troopers, then a team with ropes and ice climbing gear. They wouldn't let me get any closer, but I watched from the overlook as they carefully cut into the ice around the dark shape. It took them 3 hours. By then, the news vans had arrived and a small crowd of hikers stood watching. The rangers finally got the body free. It was frozen solid, still in the ice block they'd cut out. They lowered it down on ropes, loaded it onto a transport sled. As they brought it past my overlook, I got a clear look. A man, completely frozen, wearing a brown jacket and jeans that looked old-fashioned. His face was gray-blue, preserved like he'd died yesterday instead of... How long had he been in there? One of the troopers saw me staring and came over. "You're the one who spotted this?" I nodded. "I was just taking pictures for a school project." "Good eye," he said. "We're going to need your photos and a statement." The forensic examination took 2 days. The body was identified through dental records and a wallet frozen in his jacket pocket. Marcus Webb, aged 34, reported missing on August 12, 1978. He'd gone hiking on Mendenhall Glacier and never came back. Search teams looked for 3 weeks and found nothing. But here's the thing that made the story explode all over Alaska news. Marcus Webb's family had buried him. In 1979, a body had washed up near Aki Bay, badly decomposed, wearing similar clothing. The family identified it as Marcus, held a funeral, put up a headstone. For 45 years, they thought he was resting in the Evergreen Cemetery, except the real Marcus had been frozen in the glacier the entire time. The family was contacted, and they were devastated. I saw the daughter on the news. She was in her 50s now, crying, saying she'd visited her father's grave every year on his birthday. "Who did we bury?" she kept asking. "Who's in that coffin?" I couldn't stop thinking about it. A man frozen in ice for 45 years, perfectly preserved, while his family mourned the wrong body. And the glacier had held on to him all that time, carrying him slowly downhill as it flowed, until the climate warmed enough to expose him. I went back to Mendenhall 2 days later. I couldn't help it. I stood at the overlook and studied the glacier face with my camera, really studied it this time. The ice moves. I knew that from my classes. Glaciers flow like slow rivers, a few feet per year, carrying everything trapped inside them. If Marcus Webb went into a crevasse up near the glacier's head in 1978, and his body just emerged now near the terminus, that meant... I pulled out my field notebook and started doing calculations. Glacier flow rates, ice depth, the angle of the ice face. If one body came out here and the glacier flows at a consistent rate, then anything else trapped up there would follow predictable paths as the ice melted and moved. I marked 6 spots on my glacier map where bodies might emerge based on ice flow patterns and current melt rates. 2 weeks later, I was proven right. Another body surfaced at the second location I'd marked. A woman, frozen in 1980s clothing. The rangers called me directly this time. "Tasha, you need to see this. It's exactly where you said." Her name was Linda Choi, missing since October 1983. Same story, went hiking alone, never came back. Search teams found nothing. Family eventually held a memorial service without a body. The news interviewed me. They called me the Glacier Girl, said I had some kind of sixth sense for finding bodies. But it wasn't magic. It was just understanding how glaciers work, how ice moves and melts. I explained it on camera. Glaciers are like conveyor belts. Whatever goes in up top eventually comes out at the bottom. Climate change is speeding up the process. Alaska state troopers asked if I'd help map more potential sites. They gave me satellite imagery, historical, weather data, ice flow models. I spent a week analyzing everything, cross-referencing with missing persons reports from the 1970s and 80s. I predicted 6 more locations. Over the next month, 3 more bodies emerged, all at sites I'd mapped, all hikers from decades ago, all perfectly preserved in the ice. I felt sick. I wasn't documenting climate change anymore. I was finding a graveyard. Then the forensic examiner called me in for a consultation. His name was Dr. Chen, and he looked exhausted. We sat in his office at the state crime lab, and he pulled up autopsy photos on his computer. "All 5 bodies have the same injury," he said, pointing at x-rays. "Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Same angle, same force, same location." My stomach dropped. "You mean these weren't accidents? Someone killed these people and hid them in the glacier?" The FBI opened a serial killer investigation the next day. My glacier mapping project became evidence in a murder case. I was assigned a victim liaison agent named Sarah Torres, and suddenly I was working directly with federal investigators, using my climate data to track where a killer had hidden bodies decades ago. Agent Torres brought me into the FBI field office and spread out my maps on a conference table. "Based on where these bodies emerged, can you calculate where they originally went into the ice?" I could. I traced backwards. If the ice flows southeast at roughly 15 feet per year, and Marcus Webb emerged here in 2024 after going missing in 1978, then he went in approximately, I marked the spot on the map. Somewhere in this area, there's a cluster of crevasses here, deep ones. We did the same calculation for all 5 bodies. They'd all been placed in crevasses within a half-mile radius, all between 1975 and 1995. "Whoever did this knew the glacier extremely well," Torres said. "They knew exactly where to put bodies so they'd be hidden for decades." The FBI built a profile. Someone who worked on or around Mendenhall Glacier during that 20-year period. Someone with intimate knowledge of ice formations, crevasse locations, glacier movement patterns. Someone the victims would have trusted. They found him in 2 days. Harold Vance, age 78, retired glacier tour guide. He'd led hiking tours on Mendenhall from 1972 to 1997, knew every crevasse and ice cave, was considered one of the most knowledgeable guides in Alaska. He'd personally led over 2,000 tours, taught glacier safety classes, even consulted for the Park Service. When the FBI brought him in for questioning, Harold had advanced dementia. He couldn't remember what he'd eaten for breakfast, let alone any murders. His lawyer argued he was mentally incompetent to stand trial. The psychiatric evaluation agreed. His cognitive function was too impaired to understand proceedings or assist in his own defense. I was furious. This man had killed at least 5 people, probably more, and he might escape justice because he was old and couldn't remember. I found his daughter's address through public records and drove to her house in the Mendenhall Valley. Margaret Vance answered the door, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with her father's eyes. "I know who you are," she said. "The Glacier Girl. You think my dad's a murderer. The evidence. My father is a good man." She cut me off. "He coached my softball team. He volunteered at church. He would never hurt anyone." "Then help me prove that," I said. "Let me see his records, his tour logs, anything that shows where he was when these people disappeared." Margaret hesitated, then sighed. "He kept journals. Every tour he ever led, he wrote about it, thousands of pages. They're in my basement." She let me in. We spent 6 hours going through boxes of journals. Harold, Dee's neat handwriting describing weather conditions, glacier formations, tourist groups. Innocent enough at first. Then I found August 15th, 1978, 3 days after Marcus Webb went missing. MW questioned me about the dangerous crevasse near Mendenhall Towers. Too curious, too persistent, necessitated silence. The ice keeps all secrets, the glacier provides. My hands shook. I showed Margaret. Her face went white. No, that doesn't mean... We kept reading. October 1983. LC complained about my route choice, said I was taking unnecessary risks, disrespectful to the glacier. She won't disrespect it anymore. More entries. Initials that matched the dead. Dates that matched disappearances. All of them describing murders in coded language. Proud of his work. Justifying it as protecting the glacier from people who didn't respect the ice. Margaret's hands shook so badly she dropped the journal. Oh God. Oh my God. The FBI seized the journals the next day. They were a written confession spanning 23 years. Harold had systematically killed tourists who asked too many questions or disrespected the glacier. His twisted logic was that he was protecting the ice by eliminating people who didn't treat it with proper reverence. Margaret tried to kill herself 2 days later. Pills. They found her in time, but she was in the ICU for a week. I visited her in the hospital. We both cried. I can't reconcile it, she whispered. The man who tucked me in at night killed people. How do both things exist in the same person? I didn't have an answer. The legal battle was complicated. Harold's dementia meant he genuinely didn't remember the murders. Defense attorneys argued that the person sitting in court wasn't the same person who'd committed the crimes. His mind was gone, his memories erased. Could you prosecute someone for crimes they truly didn't remember? I attended every hearing. I brought families of the victims together, organized press conferences, demanded justice. I didn't care if Harold remembered. The families remembered. The victims deserved justice, even if their killer's brain had erased his guilt. During one competency hearing, Harold had a lucid moment. He looked at me across the courtroom. I'd been on the news enough that he recognized me. He smiled. You found them all, he said clearly. Good girl. The ice was melting too fast anyway. They were going to come out eventually. Then he slipped back into confusion, asking his lawyer where he was, but I'd recorded it on my phone. Evidence of intermittent competency. The judge ruled Harold was competent enough to stand trial based on his journals and his lucid statements. The trial was surreal. Prosecutors reading his journal entries describing murders in chilling detail while Harold sat confused, not reacting, genuinely not remembering he'd written them. I testified about finding the bodies, about glacier movement, about how Harold had used his expertise to hide victims for decades. The jury looked horrified. They found him guilty on 5 counts of first-degree murder. At 78, he became the oldest person convicted of serial murder in Alaska history. The judge sentenced him to life without parole in a medical facility. But I kept mapping the glacier. I predicted 3 more body locations. All 3 were found over the next year. Harold's confirmed victim count rose to 8. 1 body didn't match any missing persons report. DNA testing revealed he was a transient from Seattle who'd disappeared in 1984. He'd never been reported missing because he had no family. Nobody had noticed he was gone. I wrote a paper about it, Climate Change as Forensic Witness, How Glacier Melt Reveals Historical Crimes. It was published in the Journal of Forensic Science. Margaret contacted me again. She'd found a locked box in her father's belongings with photos of 7 unidentified women, all looking like tourists from different decades. The FBI matched 2 of them to bodies found at Taku Glacier, another area where Harold had led tours. His confirmed victim count reached 10. Harold died in the medical prison facility 14 months after conviction. Heart failure, age 79. He never showed remorse, never helped find the remaining victims. Families were outraged he died without suffering. I attended his funeral. Just Margaret, a few family members, and me. I brought photos of the 10 confirmed victims and placed them on his casket. Margaret didn't stop me. I still work at glacier grounds, still serve coffee to tourists who want to see Mendenhall. Sometimes I want to warn them that the beautiful ice field they're photographing is a graveyard, that dozens of bodies might still be trapped in there waiting to emerge as the world warms. The most disturbing part isn't that Harold killed at least 10 people. It's that he lived to 79 as a beloved grandfather, coached kids baseball, led church fundraisers, was respected and trusted, while bodies froze in the ice he showed to tourists. He would have died with his secret if climate change hadn't melted his burial ground. I volunteer with forensic teams now, use my glacier knowledge to predict where other killers might have hidden bodies in Alaska's ice. 3 years later, bodies are still emerging from Mendenhall. 2 more found that can't be connected to Harold. Might be other killers. Might be accidents. I document everything, build databases. I carry a photo in my wallet. The transient from Seattle, the one whose name we'll never know. He died alone on a glacier in 1984, and nobody noticed he was gone. At least one person remembers he existed now. At least one person knows his death mattered. Every time I look at Mendenhall Glacier, I wonder how many more bodies are in there. How many killers over a century used Alaska's ice to hide evidence? As glaciers worldwide retreat from warming, how many more mass graves will be revealed? I'll spend the rest of my life mapping predictions, finding remains, giving families closure. The ice keeps secrets, but not forever. Eventually, everything frozen comes back to the surface. The glacier provides, and the glacier takes away. My name is Lisa Chen, and I've been working maintenance and custodial jobs for 11 years now. I've cleaned hospitals, office buildings, even an old prison once. I've seen weird things. People leave behind strange stuff. Buildings make odd noises at night. You learn not to ask too many questions. But what happened during my 2 months in Whittier, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about isolation, forgotten places, and what happens when people choose to look away from terrible truths. Whittier is not a normal town. It's barely a town at all. 270 people live there, and almost all of them live in one building. Begich Towers, a 14-story concrete structure left over from World War II. The only way into Whittier is through a 1-lane tunnel that closes at night. In winter, the sun barely comes up. It's the kind of place where you can feel cut off from the rest of the world, even though Anchorage is only 60 miles away. I took the job in October because the pay was good, and I needed a fresh start after a bad breakup. The building manager said they had trouble keeping custodians. People didn't like the isolation, the dark winters, the cramped apartments. I didn't mind. I'd always been comfortable alone. The apartment they gave me was tiny, maybe 200 square feet, but it had a view of the harbor through a small window. I worked night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., cleaning hallways, common areas, and maintenance spaces. My supervisor was Pete, a man in his 70s who'd lived in Whittier since the 1960s. He was quiet, kept to himself, but he knew every inch of that building. On my second day, he took me down to show me the maintenance tunnels. These weren't just basement hallways. They were old military tunnels, concrete corridors that connected to storage rooms, utility spaces, and old bomb shelters from when this was an active army base. Stay on the marked paths," Pete said, his voice echoing in the cold tunnel. The walls were painted concrete. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, and I could hear the distant hum of machinery. "See these red lines painted on the walls? Don't go past them. Don't try to explore locked areas. People who break that rule have accidents." I thought he was being dramatic, trying to scare the new girl, but I agreed. The tunnels were creepy enough without exploring. They smelled like wet concrete and rust. Every sound echoed. The temperature was always just cold enough to make your breath visible. During my second week, I was cleaning an old storage room on the lowest level when I found something behind a metal shelf. It was a key ring with 4 keys on it, each one labeled with faded masking tape. Deep Storage A, Deep Storage B, Deep Storage C, and Deep Storage D. I brought them to Pete that night. When I held them up, his face went pale. Actually pale, the color drained out of his cheeks. "Where did you find those?" he asked. "Storage room 3, behind the shelf. What's deep storage?" "That's none of your concern," he said, reaching for them. "Give me those keys." His reaction was so strong, so immediate, that I got suspicious. Before I handed them over, I slipped one key into my pocket, the one labeled Deep Storage C. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe. Or just the sense that Pete was hiding something big. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those keys, about Pete's reaction. Around 3 a.m., I gave in. I got dressed, grabbed my flashlight, and went down to the tunnels. It took me 20 minutes of walking to find it. A door I'd never noticed before, painted the same gray as the concrete walls. Authorized personnel only. Deep Storage C was stenciled on it in faded black letters. My heart was pounding as I tried the key. It worked. Beyond the door was a tunnel that sloped downward. It was different from the maintained areas, rougher, with bare rock walls in places, much older construction. The air smelled stale, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. I followed the tunnel for maybe 200 yards, my flashlight beam cutting through complete darkness. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, maybe 40 feet across. What I saw made me stop breathing. It was set up like living quarters. 6 cots lined the walls. There was a cooking area with an old camp stove, shelves with supplies, a table with chairs. Everything was covered in thick dust, untouched for years. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. Photos, books, military uniforms folded on shelves. I picked up one of the photos. It showed young men in army uniforms smiling at the camera. The date written on the back said 1964. Then I found the journal. It was on the table, a standard military issue notebook. The first entry was dated March 15, 1964, written by someone named Thomas Garrett. My hands shook as I read it by flashlight. Day 1 of quarantine. Myself and 14 others exposed during weapons testing incident. They say it's a precaution, probably nothing, but they want us isolated for 2 weeks until they're sure. Boring but safe. We have supplies, cards, books. Could be worse. The entries continued. Day 3, Day 7, Day 14. His tone changed. Day 19. They said 2 weeks. We keep knocking on the access door, but nobody answers. Food is running low. Something's wrong. My stomach turned as I kept reading. Day 47. 3 of us tried to force the door. It won't budge. Hansen killed Roberts today over the last rations. We're dying down here. I don't think anyone is coming back for us. The final entry was dated 6 months after the first. Day 183. Only 5 of us left. The others starved or killed each other. I can hear them in the dark sometimes, the ones who died. Or maybe I'm going insane. If anyone finds this, tell my wife I tried to get home. I felt sick. I swept my flashlight around the chamber and saw something in the corner that made me drop the light. Bones. Human bones. At least 4 or 5 skeletons partially hidden under rotting blankets. I ran. I grabbed the journal and ran through that tunnel faster than I've ever moved in my life, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls. I went straight to Pete's apartment and pounded on his door until he opened it. It was almost 4 a.m. He took one look at my face and knew. "You went to deep storage," he said quietly. I pushed past him into his apartment and slammed the journal on his table. "Tell me what happened." Pete sat down heavily. For a long moment, he just stared at the journal. Then he started talking. 1964. There was a chemical weapons accident during testing. 15 soldiers were exposed. They were quarantined in the deep tunnels while officials figured out decontamination procedures. But the base was being decommissioned at the same time. The commander who knew about the soldiers got reassigned to Vietnam. Records were lost in the chaos. The men were forgotten. Forgotten? My voice cracked. They starved to death. By the time anyone remembered, months later, they found evidence of what happened. The military buried the whole thing, sealed the tunnel, classified everything. Easier than admitting they let 15 men die because of bureaucratic screw-ups. Why aren't the bodies recovered? Pete looked at me with tired eyes. Would you want to admit you let 15 soldiers starve to death? My brother was the assistant base commander. He knew. It destroyed him. Drank himself to death by 1975. Everyone who's been here long enough knows. We don't talk about it. Those tunnels are cursed. You don't go down there. I'm reporting this, I said. Lisa, please. My brother's military pension supports his daughter. She has MS, can't work. If this comes out, if his name gets connected, 15 men died. 60 years ago. What good does it do now? I called Alaska State Troopers anyway. The woman who answered sounded skeptical, but she said they'd send someone to investigate. It would take a few days. That night I was working in the maintenance tunnels around 2 a.m. when all the lights went out. Not just the lights in one section. Every light. Complete, total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the button wouldn't work. The battery was fresh that morning. It should have worked. The emergency lights didn't come on either. Something was very wrong. Then I heard footsteps. They came from the direction of deep storage. Slow, dragging footsteps. Multiple sets, coming closer. I ran. I ran blind in complete darkness, hands on the walls trying to find the exit. Behind me, the footsteps got faster. I heard breathing, labored, desperate breathing, and whispers. Voices whispering in the darkness, words I couldn't make out. I found a maintenance room and threw myself inside, slamming the door and locking it. A second later, something started pounding on the door. Heavy impacts, like fists. I was crying, screaming into my radio, but nobody answered. The pounding continued for what felt like hours. Then it stopped. The lights flickered back on. I waited 5 minutes before I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but there were footprints on the concrete floor. Muddy boot prints, dozens of them, leading from the direction of deep storage and stopping at my door. I took photos with my phone. The prints were military boots, old style, the kind from the 1960s. I showed them to the building maintenance staff the next morning. They looked disturbed, but said nothing. Just cleaned up the prints and told me not to worry about it. I went to the building manager with the photos. He sighed heavily. This happens every few years, he said. Workers report things in the tunnels. We tell them it's acoustic tricks. Old buildings make noises. Just ignore it and do your job. That's when I realized everyone knew. It was an institutional conspiracy of silence. Everyone who worked there knew something was wrong in those tunnels, but they all pretended it wasn't happening. I contacted a journalist in Anchorage. I sent him copies of the journal, photos of the remains, everything. He called me back that night, excited. This is huge if it's true, he said, but I need more evidence. Can you get DNA samples from the remains? I went back to deep storage the next day, this time with a sample collection kit. But when I reached the chamber, the remains were gone. Completely vanished. The cots and supplies were still there, but the bones had disappeared. Then I looked at the door. The lock was broken. From the inside. The metal was bent like someone had forced it open from within the sealed chamber. I installed a motion-activated camera in the tunnel without permission. 3 days later, I reviewed the footage. The camera had captured figures moving through the tunnels at 3 a.m. They were shadowy, indistinct, but clearly human-shaped. They walked with stumbling gaits, emaciated frames, dressed in what looked like rotted military uniforms. In one clip, a figure stood directly in front of the camera for 5 minutes. The image was distorted and blurry, but I could make out hollow eyes, a skeletal face, a mouth moving like it was trying to speak. I showed the footage to Pete. He watched it and started crying. "That's them," he said. "The soldiers." My brother told me before he died that he heard them in the tunnels, thought he was going crazy. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. 3 maintenance workers had died in these tunnels since 1970. All found dead near deep storage. No clear cause. Official explanations were always heart attack or accident. I realized I was in actual danger. Whatever was in those tunnels had killed before. The Alaska State Troopers finally came a week later. I led them to deep storage with their forensics, team and cadaver dogs. The chamber was empty. No remains, no evidence anyone had died there. The police found nothing. They thought I was crazy. But the dogs went insane. They barked at Bedtime. Empty corners, refused to enter certain areas, clearly detecting something the humans couldn't see. The handlers said they'd never seen anything like it. The police reviewed my camera footage. They saw the shadowy figures but dismissed them as digital artifacts and camera malfunction. Without physical evidence, they couldn't investigate further. I knew what I'd seen. Those soldiers were still down there somehow, angry, protecting their forgotten grave, waiting for someone to remember them. I made one final decision. I broke into the building maintenance office at night and found the ventilation system blueprints. I located the main access tunnel to deep storage. Then I spent the entire night sealing it with industrial concrete, 200 pounds of quick-set mixture, working alone with a headlamp. In the morning, before anyone could stop me, I spray-painted names on the wall outside Bedtime Towers. The 15 forgotten soldiers from the journal and military documents: Thomas Garrett, James Hansen, David Roberts, and 12 others. Then I quit. I packed my car and drove back to Anchorage without looking back. 6 months later, I read an article online. Another maintenance worker had died in the Bedtime Towers tunnels. They found him at a sealed concrete barrier, his fingers bloody from trying to claw through it. From the other side, the article said he'd had a history of mental health issues. Another tragic accident. But I know the truth. Those 15 men were abandoned to starve in military tunnels while bureaucrats covered their mistakes. Everyone with the power to help them chose silence instead. Their deaths were so thoroughly covered up that even their remains vanished rather than be evidence. The military would rather let vengeful ghosts haunt maintenance workers for decades than admit to the mistake. The names I painted on that wall were scrubbed off within a week. Whittier doesn't want tourists asking questions. The sealed tunnel won't stop the footsteps because you can't seal away guilt with concrete. You can't bury shame deep enough that it stops bleeding through. Somewhere in the dark beneath Bedtime Towers, 15 forgotten soldiers are still waiting for rescue that will never come. Still knocking on doors no one will open. Still dying over and over in the darkness, while hundreds of people live comfortable lives directly above them. Nobody cares enough to remember their names except me. I documented everything, knowing it would be dismissed. I painted those names, knowing they'd be erased. And sometimes the most disturbing horror isn't what happened. It's that everyone knows and chooses to forget. My name is Jesse Martinez, and I've been a carpenter for 11 years now. I specialize in historic building restoration. Old churches, Victorian houses, places that need someone who understands traditional joinery and period-correct techniques. I've worked on some pretty isolated sites before. Abandoned mills in Montana, ghost town saloons in Nevada, even a lighthouse that hadn't seen people in 40 years. I'm comfortable with empty places, or at least I thought I was. But what happened in May of 2024 during 3 days in Portlock, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about abandoned buildings. Because sometimes a place isn't really abandoned. The job came through Coastal Salvage Company. They'd won a contract to survey Portlock, this fishing village on the Kenai Peninsula that's been empty since 1950. My boss called it easy money. Just catalog anything valuable, take photos, assess which buildings could be dismantled for lumber. 3 days, good pay, all expenses covered. The official story is that everyone left because the fish stocks collapsed. Fishing village with no fish equals no village. Made sense to me. I took the job with 2 other salvage workers, Mike Chen, who'd been with the company for 15 years, and Sandra Kowalski, a newer hire, but sharp as hell. We loaded our gear into a charter boat out of Seward on a Tuesday morning. The water was calm, which the captain said was lucky. The trip took 4 hours, hugging the coastline, passing stretches of forest that looked like they'd never seen an axe. The captain, an older guy named Tom, didn't talk much during the crossing. But when Portlock came into view, he finally spoke up. "You folks camping overnight?" "3 nights, Mike said. "Got a lot of buildings to catalog." Tom's face went tight. "I'll be back Friday morning, 9 sharp. Radio me if you need earlier pickup. Don't mess around." "And out here?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Sandra asked. Tom didn't answer. He just helped us unload our equipment onto the old dock, fired up his engine, and pulled away faster than seemed necessary. Portlock looked like everyone had just left. Not abandoned gradually, but all at once. The buildings were still standing. Houses, a schoolhouse, a store, even a small post office. Roofs sagging, paint peeling, but structurally sound. And when we started opening doors, we found stuff inside. Furniture, dishes on tables, photos still hanging on walls. It was like walking onto a movie set of the 1940s, except everything was rotting. "This is weird," Sandra said, standing in a kitchen where a rusted pan still sat on an old stove. "Who leaves their stuff behind?" "People in a hurry," I said. Mike was more practical. "More stuff means more value. Let's start the inventory." We set up our tent camp in a clearing near the dock. 3 tents, a campfire ring, our equipment stored under tarps. Cell service was dead. Expected that. We had a satellite radio for emergencies and enough food for 5 days. The plan was simple. Split up during daylight, document everything, meet back at camp before dark. The first day went fine. We measured buildings, photographed interiors, made notes on structural integrity. I found myself in what must have been the village store. The shelves were still stocked with rusted cans, price tags from 1949 still visible. But something bothered me. The exterior walls had these marks. Deep scratches in the wood, high up near the roofline. Way too high for a person to reach. They looked almost like claw marks. "Hey, Mike," I called out when we regrouped that afternoon. "You see any bear sign around here?" "Haven't seen shit," he said. "No scat, no tracks, nothing. Weird, actually. You'd think bears would be all over an abandoned village." That night, we built a fire and cooked dinner. The sun set around 10 p.m. Alaska in May stays light forever. But when darkness finally came, it came complete. No light pollution, no moon. Just our fire and the black wall of forest surrounding the village. Around midnight, I was almost asleep when I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones, crunching through the underbrush between buildings. But the pattern was wrong. Not the 4-legged rhythm of a bear. 2 legs. Walking upright. "You guys hear that?" Sandra whispered from her tent. Mike was already up, grabbing his flashlight. He unzipped his tent and shined the beam toward the sound. For just a second, the light caught something between 2 buildings. Something massive. Broad shoulders, covered in dark hair, at least 8 feet tall. Then it moved. Fast. Too fast. Melting back into the tree line. "What the fuck was that?" Mike's voice cracked. We all scrambled out of our tents. Mike swept his flashlight across the village, but whatever it was had vanished. My heart was hammering. I've seen bears before. This wasn't a bear. "Probably just a moose," Mike said, but he didn't sound convinced. None of us slept well. Morning came with fog rolling off the water. We found them right away. Footprints in the mud near our camp. Big ones. 18 inches long, 5 distinct toes, pressed deep like whatever made them was incredibly heavy. They circled our tents, moving between buildings, like something had been patrolling the village while we slept. Sandra crouched next to one print, her face pale. This can't be real." "Bear?" Mike suggested, but even he sounded doubtful. "Wrong shape," I said. "And look at the stride, 6 feet between prints. Bears don't walk like that." I took photos with my phone. The prints were everywhere. Fresh ones from last night, older ones that were days or weeks old. Whatever made these had been here a while. And it had been here specifically last night, watching us. We should have left then. But we had a job to do, and Mike reminded us the boat wasn't coming back until Friday. "Let's just finish the survey and stay together," he said. Safety in numbers. We decided to search the schoolhouse next. It was one of the larger buildings, 2 rooms with desks still arranged in rows. I found them in a drawer, old journals, handwritten by a teacher named Elizabeth Moore. The entries started normal. Lesson plans, student names. Then they got dark. March 15th, 1949. Something has been watching the village from the tree line. Albert Johnson saw it yesterday while checking his traps. He said it was like a man, but wrong. Too tall, too hairy. April 3rd, 1949. Albert is missing. They found his trap line destroyed, blood on the trees. No body. This is the third disappearance this month. May 22nd, 1949. The creature came into the village last night. It threw rocks at the houses, screaming like a person in pain. Mary Stevens saw it. She says it has red eyes and hands like a man. Her daughter is terrified to go outside. October 18th, 1949. It took another child from the yard. We're leaving. All of us. This place belongs to whatever lives in those woods. We call it Nantinak, like the old stories. The hairy man, the cannibal giant. God help anyone who stays. The journal ended there. I showed Mike and Sandra. Sandra's hands were shaking as she read it. "This is bullshit," Mike said. "Old ghost stories to explain why the fishing failed." "Those footprints aren't a ghost story," Sandra shot back. I pulled out my phone and searched for Nantinak. The articles that loaded before we lost signal painted a picture. Alutiiq tribe legends about a cannibal giant that lived in the mountains. 8 feet tall, covered in hair, intelligent but violent. It hated human settlements. It killed anyone who stayed too long in its territory. "Bigfoot stories," Mike said dismissively. "Every state's got them." "Alaska's got a lot of empty space," I said quietly. "Maybe something actually lives in it." Sandra wanted to radio for early pickup. Mike refused. "We're professionals. We finished the job. It's just an animal." Day 2, we were working in an old warehouse when the door slammed shut behind us. We all spun around. Mike grabbed the handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. Something was holding it from outside. "Push!" Mike shouted. We all threw our weight against the door. It burst open suddenly, and we stumbled out just in time to see something massive running into the forest. Hunched shoulders, dark brown hair, moving on 2 legs with a loping, impossibly fast gait. Mike chased after it like an idiot. Sandra and I followed, shouting for him to stop. He froze at the tree line, staring into the forest. "Did you see it?" His voice was barely a whisper. It was running upright, too tall for a bear, too fast for a person. We searched more buildings after that, found claw marks on door frames, dried bloodstains on walls that had been there since the 40s. In one house, I found a child's shoe with something embedded in it. A tooth, yellowed and massive. 6 inches long, canine-shaped but way too big to be from any normal animal. That night, it came for us. The first rock hit our tent around 9 p.m. A fist-sized stone punching through the canvas with enough force to crack a skull if it had hit someone. Then another, and another. A barrage of rocks pelting our camp from the darkness, thrown with incredible accuracy and power. We huddled inside our tents, terrified to move. The attack lasted an hour, then silence. I set up my trail camera outside my tent, aimed at the clearing. In the morning, I reviewed the footage. My hands went numb. The creature stood 30 feet from our tents for 3 hours straight, just watching. It was massive, 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, shoulders as broad as a refrigerator. But the face, Jesus, the face, humanoid but wrong. Extended jaw, sloped forehead, eyes that reflected the camera's infrared light like an animal's. It was bipedal. It was intelligent. And it had watched us sleep. "We're leaving," Sandra said after seeing the footage. "I don't care about the contract." We loaded the boat. Mike turned the key. Nothing. He checked the fuel line. It was cut, slashed cleanly like someone used a knife. We checked the radio next. Smashed. The casing cracked, the components destroyed. "It sabotaged us," I said. "It trapped us here." Mike pulled a pistol from his bag. "Then we wait. The boat comes Friday. 2 more nights. We can handle that." We built a fire and stayed together, weapons close. Night fell. The screaming started around midnight, human-like but distorted, modulating in pitch in ways no human throat could manage. It came from multiple directions, like the creature was circling us. Then we saw it, walking through the village, silhouetted against moonlight. 8 feet tall, moving upright but hunched, long arms swinging. It approached our camp slowly, deliberately. Mike fired 3 warning shots into the air. The creature screamed and retreated, but it didn't leave. We heard it all night, circling, sometimes walking on 2 legs. Sometimes we heard it climbing the buildings, nails scraping against wood. Dawn came. We found Sandra's backpack shredded, our remaining food destroyed, deep claw marks gouged into the side of our boat. It was systematically eliminating our resources. That's when I saw the symbols, scratched into the dirt near our tents, crude but deliberate. I recognized them from the schoolhouse journal. Alutique, protective symbols. The teacher had drawn them in her notes. Did that thing just write to us? Sandra's voice was hollow. It was intelligent. It wasn't just attacking. It was communicating, telling us to leave. But we were trapped. Mike volunteered to find food in the village. He didn't come back. We found him 2 hours later in the schoolhouse. His throat was torn out, his body dragged inside and positioned sitting at a desk like a student. The message was, "Cleutros," where "This is my territory, you're trespassing." Sandra was catatonic after that. I armed myself with a hammer and a handsaw, carpenter's tools, but they were all we had. We barricaded ourselves in the old store, the building with the thickest walls. Night 3. The creature came. It pounded on the doors, threw debris through windows. We hid in a back room, silent, listening to it destroy the building, searching for us. Then it made sounds, not animal sounds, words, guttural, distorted but recognizable. "Leave my land." It had language. It was trying to talk to us. I yelled back, desperate. "We can't leave. Our boat is broken. Please." The pounding stopped. Silence. Then footsteps walking away. Morning came. We emerged carefully, expecting an attack. Instead, we found our boat's fuel line repaired. Crudely, but functionally. Tied together with plant fiber. There was a message in the dirt. Crude drawings. Boats leaving. A stick figure with an X through it, staying. Leave or die. We started the boat immediately. It worked. We left Portlock and didn't look back. 20 miles out, Sandra remembered we'd left all our equipment and Mike's body. Neither of us suggested going back. The police ruled Mike's death an animal attack. A recovery team retrieved his body but found all our equipment destroyed, smashed into pieces. They saw the footprints, heard screams. But they never saw the creature. The coroner confirmed Mike was killed by something with immense bite force, larger than any bear on record. I became obsessed after that. Researched every Nantinak sighting, found a pattern. Villages abandoned when they encroached on certain territories. Always stories of giant hairy men. Portlock's official records showed 12 people disappeared or killed between 1948 and 1950. Official reports blamed bears, but survivors described the wild man and the hairy giant that talks. I contacted a Bigfoot research organization. They were ecstatic. I showed them the footage. They planned an expedition. I didn't go, too traumatized. They reported finding noxious, being at first. Then a researcher disappeared during night watch. Camera smashed, tent shredded. They abandoned the expedition after 2 days. I realized something. The creature only appears when people plan to stay. Day visits are tolerated. Camping overnight isn't. It's defending its territory from permanent human presence. Alaska Fish and Game investigated but found insufficient evidence. Officially, Portlock is abandoned due to economic factors. The deaths were bear attacks. Case closed. Sandra developed PTSD. Last I heard, she moved to Anchorage and refuses to discuss Portlock. She told someone she has nightmares about the creature trying to talk. I still have the footage, but I won't publish it. I made a promise to myself. If the creature let me live, I wouldn't help others find it. I owe it my silence. Portlock remains abandoned. Tourists visit for the day sometimes. Some report feeling watched, hearing screams, finding footprints, but no one camps overnight anymore. I moved to Fairbanks and work regular construction now. No more remote sites, no more salvage jobs. I still have nightmares about that creature standing outside my tent, watching with intelligent, calculating eyes. I keep the photo of those footprints in my wallet. Sometimes I pull it out to remember I survived something that shouldn't exist. Something that learned to repair boat motors to make humans leave. Something that writes messages in dirt and positions bodies to communicate. And the most disturbing part isn't that an 8-foot bipedal creature lives in the Kenai Peninsula wilds. It's that it's intelligent enough to know when humans plan to document it versus just passing through. Strategic enough to sabotage equipment without killing unless necessary. Linguistic enough to attempt crude speech, and territorial enough to have permanently depopulated an entire village through systematic killing, until every resident fled. And Nantinak is still there in Portlock, maintaining the abandoned ghost town as its territory, allowing brief visits but killing anyone who stays. I wonder how many other creatures like Nantinak exist in Alaska's millions of acres of wilderness. How many species remain undiscovered because they're intelligent enough to hide, violent enough to eliminate witnesses, and ancient enough to know that remaining cryptid is the only way to survive modern humanity's need to cage and study everything. Portlock's 12 deaths in the 1940s are just the documented ones. How many others vanished into those woods without witnesses, without records, consumed by something that decided humans had crossed a line and needed to be driven out permanently? I should have died in Portlock. The creature spared me only because I showed fear and respect, because it could have killed me as easily as it killed Mike. And it chose mercy, in the form of a repaired fuel line and a dirt message. Sometimes mercy is just another word for warning. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a government contractor for 18 years. I fix buildings, mostly old military stuff that Uncle Sam forgot about. Barracks, offices, warehouses, places that got left behind when the money ran out. I've worked on bases from Nevada to North Dakota, seen buildings that looked ready to collapse, dealt with asbestos, black mold, you name it. I'm good at what I do. I don't scare easy, and I definitely don't believe in ghosts. But what happened on Adak Island between March and May of last year broke something in me, and I need to tell someone about it, even if nobody believes me. Adak Island is one of the loneliest places on Earth. It's part of Alaska, but it's closer to Russia than the American mainland. The Navy built a massive base there during World War II. Thousands of soldiers lived there. Then in 1997, they just left, packed up and abandoned the whole place. Now there's maybe 300 people living in a ghost town of empty buildings, constant fog, and wind that hits you like a wall. I got hired with a crew of 6 to renovate some of the old buildings. The Coast Guard was thinking about using the island again. Our job was to make 3 warehouses and 2 barracks safe enough for people to work in. 3-month contract, decent pay, and I'd worked remote sites before. No problem. I flew in on a Tuesday. The pilot warned me about the fog. It comes in thick, he said. Like soup. You can't see 10 feet in front of you. Don't go walking alone when it rolls in. I figured he meant it was easy to get lost. Just practical safety advice. I wish that's all it was. The island felt wrong from day one, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The buildings were in rough shape. 50 years of weather had done real damage. But the work was straightforward. My crew was good people. Elena was my second in command, ex-Army, tough as nails. Tyler was young, but eager. The others knew their jobs. The fog rolled in on day 4. I'd never seen anything like it. One minute you could see the mountains in the distance. The next, everything vanished. The world became gray and thick and heavy. It pressed against the windows like something alive. Elena went to check measurements on a building half a mile away. Standard stuff. She took her radio and said she'd be back in 20 minutes. An hour later, she still wasn't back. We went looking for her with flashlights and radios. The fog swallowed the light after about 8 feet. I kept calling her name. My voice sounded flat, like the fog was eating the sound. We found her a quarter mile from where she should have been. walking in circles. When our lights hit her, she turned around, and I saw her face. Elena, who I'd seen handle an electrical fire without blinking, looked terrified. "They were screaming," she said. Her voice shook. Hundreds of voices, screaming at me from inside the fog. We got her back to the main building. She sat with a blanket around her shoulders, hands shaking around a cup of coffee. "I heard them from every direction," she told us, "overlapping. Some sounded like children, some like adults in pain. I tried to run toward them. I thought people needed help, but the voices kept moving, staying just ahead of me in the fog." She looked up at me. "I saw shapes, Marcus. People-shaped but wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving through the fog without making footprints in the mud." Tyler suggested she'd had a panic attack. Fog can mess with your head, make you disoriented. But I'd known Elena for 5 years. She didn't panic. "Something lives in that fog," she said quietly. "It uses voices to pull people away." She refused to work during fog after that. I'm a practical guy. When something doesn't make sense, I research it. That night, I looked up ADAC's history on my laptop. Up to 19 people disappeared on the island between 1950 and 1997, all during heavy fog. Bodies never found. Official explanation: drowned or died of exposure. The next day, I talked to some of the local residents. Most were Unangan, native Aleut people whose families had lived on these islands for thousands of years. An old man named Peter ran the island's only restaurant. "You saw something in the fog," he said. It wasn't a question. I told him about Elena. He nodded slowly. "We call them kayak kuyuks, fog spirits. They've been here longer than any of us. They mimic human voices, lure people away. Our ancestors knew not to trust any voice calling from the fog, no matter how familiar it sounded." "You're telling me there's something supernatural living in the fog?" I asked. Peter shook his head. "Not supernatural. Real. They're real creatures. They hunt by sound, use mimicry like a tool. This island has a nest of them." I thanked him and left. I still didn't believe it. Fog spirits. Come on. But 3 days later, I changed my mind. The fog rolled in heavy on a Wednesday afternoon, thick as cotton, pressing against every window. I was working alone in one of the warehouses, checking electrical panels. Then I heard her voice. "Dad! Dad, help me! I'm lost!" My daughter Sophia. Her exact voice. But Sophia was in Seattle, 1,600 miles away, safe in her college dorm. Every logical part of my brain knew that. But hearing her voice, scared, calling for help, triggered something deeper than logic. I stepped outside into the fog. "Daddy, please, I can't find my way." She only called me Daddy when she was really scared. The voice was coming from somewhere ahead, maybe 30 feet away. I couldn't see that far. I walked toward it. The voice stayed ahead of me, always just out of sight. "Over here, Dad. I'm over here." I'd been walking for 10 minutes when I realized I had no idea which direction I'd come from. The warehouse was gone. Everything was gray. Then the voice changed. "Marcus, I'm cold. I need you." Sarah, my ex-wife, who died in a car crash years ago. I stopped walking. Something was hunting me, using the voices of people I loved to pull me deeper into the fog. I turned around to go back, but every direction looked the same. The fog pressed in on all sides. I heard multiple voices now, overlapping. Some I recognized, some were strangers screaming for help. Then I saw it. A shape moved through the fog, maybe 20 feet away. Tall, impossibly tall, 9 feet at least. Thin, like something starving. Walking on 2 legs but moving wrong, jerky, like a puppet with broken strings. It passed within 15 feet of me. I held my breath. The thing was shaped like a person, but the proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, hanging past where its knees should be. Fingers like claws. Head too small for its body. The fog seemed to swirl around it like it was generating the mist. It stopped, turned its head toward me, I saw eye sockets glowing faint green through the fog. It was looking right at me. Then it opened its mouth. "Dad, why won't you help me?" Sophia's voice, coming out of that thing's mouth. I ran, crashed into a building wall I didn't know was there, followed it, hands scraping against concrete until I found a door, threw myself inside and slammed it shut. I was in one of the abandoned barracks, not the warehouse. I'd walked half a mile from where I'd started. My hands shook so bad I could barely work my radio. When I finally got it on, I told the crew what happened. Most of them thought I'd gotten disoriented. Too much time alone, fog playing tricks. But Elena said quietly, "That's what I saw. The tall, thin thing." And it screamed in my mother's voice. She's been dead for 10 years. We made new rules after that. Nobody works alone during fog. Everyone stays inside when visibility drops below 20 feet, but the voices kept coming. Different voices for different people. Always someone they loved was dead or far away. Tyler heard his sister calling. She'd been missing for 6 years, presumed dead. He ran into the fog before anyone could grab him. We searched for 6 hours. Found him 3 miles away, sitting in the mud, staring at nothing. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. We had to carry him back. They flew him to Anchorage the next day. The doctors said he was in shock. 2 weeks later, they called me. Tyler had finally talked. He told them about seeing things in the fog, people I knew melting, their faces coming off, and those tall things were eating the faces and wearing them. I decided we needed proof. Set up cameras on poles around our work site, motion sensors, night vision, the works. Next fog event, we'd have footage. The fog came 2 nights later, thick and heavy. The cameras activated. Morning came. We reviewed the footage. I wish we hadn't. Multiple creatures on camera, tall and thin, moving through the fog in groups, walking on 2 legs, but their joints bent backwards. They communicated with clicking sounds like insects. In one clip, a creature walked right up to a camera. It examined it, tilting its head like a curious dog. The face was visible for maybe 5 seconds, sort of human-shaped. But the skull was wrong, elongated. No nose, just slits. Wide mouth full of thin, sharp teeth packed tight together. Eyes that glowed green in the night vision. The creatures seemed curious about our buildings. They peered into windows, tested doors with their long fingers, scratched at walls, like they were trying to understand human construction. The worst clip was the last one. 3 creatures surrounded a camera. One leaned down, face filling the frame. It opened its mouth impossibly wide, its jaw unhinged like a snake's. Multiple human voices came out at once, overlapping screams and cries for help. Men, women, children, all screaming together from inside that thing. I showed the footage to the state trooper who lived on the island. His name was Haynes. He watched it without expression, then looked at me. "We know about them," he said. "Everyone who lives here knows. We just don't talk about it to outsiders. 7 people have disappeared on a dock in the last 10 years, he continued. Always during fog. Officially, they're lost at sea or exposure deaths. But no bodies are ever found. I asked why there wasn't an investigation. A warning. Something. Haynes laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Who would we tell? The military abandoned this island. We're barely a real town. And what would we say? 9-foot fog monsters eat people? They'd shut us down. Evacuate everyone. This is our home. Peter, the Unangan elder, looked at my footage and nodded. Those are kayak, he said. Real creatures. They've evolved in the fog, hunt by sound, use mimicry to isolate prey. They're rare most places, but this island has a nest. He told me his people had always known about them. Their ancestors learned to avoid fog, never trust voices calling from the mist. But white settlers didn't listen to warnings. Hundreds died over the centuries, Peter said. Still dying. I dug deeper into Adak's history, found out the disappearance rates were always high here, even during the military years. Official records blamed harsh weather and accidents, but dozens of reports mentioned hearing voices before people vanished. I found a classified Navy report from 1975. A sailor claimed to see hostile unknown entities in fog. He was dismissed as crazy, disappeared 2 days later, body never recovered despite a massive search. The Navy knew. They've always known. My crew wanted to leave. Contract or not, this was too dangerous. But flights off Adak depend on weather. A massive storm system moved in, trapping us for 3 more weeks. We fortified our buildings, never went outside during fog, but supplies ran low. Someone had to go to town for food, 3 miles away. I volunteered, took 2 others. We went during clear weather, meteors, ate it to the store safely. Then fog rolled in while we were inside. We waited for hours, heard voices calling outside, scratching at the windows, saw tall shapes moving past the glass. The creatures knew we were inside. They waited. The fog finally lifted at dawn. We ran back to the worksite. Elena was gone. Her crew said she'd heard her son calling from outside, ran into the fog before anyone could stop her. We searched for 3 days, found her body 2 miles away, partially consumed, organs removed with surgical precision. The coroner wrote animal predation on the report, but I'd seen the wounds. Too clean, too precise. I compiled everything. Footage, testimonies, historical records. Sent it to the CDC and NOAA, suggesting an undocumented species on Adak. Both agencies ignored me, classified my reports as unverified claims. The crew finished our contract early. We accepted the financial penalty just to leave. I was the last to go. Before my flight, I met Peter one final time. He gave me a carved bone charm. "This won't protect you from kayak," he said. "Nothing does. But it will remind you to never trust voices in fog, no matter how much you love who they sound like." I'm back in Seattle now, trying to live a normal life, but I can't handle foggy days. Anytime mist rolls in, I have panic attacks, lock myself inside, cover my ears, because I swear I still hear her. Sophia calling from the fog, even though she's safe at college down the street. The worst part isn't that 9-foot predatory creatures exist on Adak Island using mimicked human voices to hunt. The worst part is that authorities know, have known for decades, but they choose silence over evacuation, because admitting the truth would mean abandoning a strategic military location, acknowledging they let personnel die for years without warning them. I published my footage online. It got dismissed as hoax CGI. Just like every other cryptid video, those things are still on Adak, still hunting during fog events, still calling out in voices of dead loved ones. The 300 people living there have accepted it as normal. They teach their children, don't go out in fog, don't follow voices, the way other places teach, don't talk to strangers. I think about how many remote Alaskan islands might have similar creatures. How many places in the Aleutian chain have fog thick enough to hide apex predators that evolved to hunt humans by sound? I think about Elena's face when we found her body. The expression of betrayal, like she died realizing her son's voice had been a trick. I'll never work another remote contract. I can't trust my senses anymore. Can't trust that voices calling for help are real humans and not kayak luring me into mist. Somewhere on Adak Island, in abandoned military buildings, there are probably more bodies. More victims who followed mimicked voices into fog and learned too late that love makes you vulnerable. That the sound of family calling your name can be the last thing you hear before something tall and thin with green glowing eyes opens its mouth wide enough to swallow your face whole. And the voices are harvested, used to call the next victim. If you ever find yourself on a remote island in heavy fog and you hear someone you love calling for help, don't follow it. No matter how real it sounds, no matter how much you want to help, just don't. My name is Diana Reeves, and I've been a wildlife photographer for 11 years. I specialize in cave ecosystems, bat colonies, hibernating animals, the kind of work that keeps me underground for days at a time while most photographers are chasing sunsets. I studied ecology at University of Alaska Fairbanks, got my wildlife photography certification, and I've documented cave systems in 43 states and 12 countries. I've encountered bears, gotten lost in the dark, nearly drowned in underground rivers, all part of the job. But what happened in March 2024 in a cave system near Talkeetna, Alaska, made me question everything I thought I knew about evolution, isolation, and what might be living in the deepest parts of our world where sunlight has never reached. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game hired me that winter to survey caves for a new state park expansion near Talkeetna. Standard conservation work: photograph the cave structures, document any animal populations, take rock samples, check for historical or archaeological significance. The pay was good, $1,400 per cave system, and I'd be working alone, which I preferred. My equipment was solid: Nikon D850 with infrared capability, 3 headlamps with backup batteries, GPS tracker, rope gear, and my usual trail of glow sticks to mark my route. I'd done this work 100 times. The locals at the Talkeetna Roadhouse warned me the first night I was there. An old guy named Carl, maybe 70, leaned over his coffee and said, "You going into those caves up north? The deep ones?" When I nodded, he shook his head. "There's something in those caves. The Dena'ina people won't go near them. They call it the Walker. Says it's been there longer than anyone remembers, living in the dark, eating whatever wanders inside." I smiled politely. Every remote location has its monster stories. Keeps tourists excited and locals feeling special. I'd heard about Bigfoot in Washington, the Mothman in West Virginia, chupacabras in Texas. None of them had ever shown up in my cave photography. "I appreciate the warning," I told Carl, "but I've been in caves all over the world. Never found anything scarier than a grumpy bear." He didn't smile back. Bears come out for food. The Walker never leaves. Think about what that means. The first cave system was about 30 miles north of town, accessed by a rough logging road that turned to mud in the spring thaw. I parked my truck at the entrance, a dark opening and a limestone cliff face, maybe 8 feet high and 12 feet wide. My thermometer read 38 degrees inside. Cold, but not freezing. Perfect for hibernating bats or small mammals. I started my voice recorder, I always narrate my surveys for later transcription, and entered at 9:47 a.m. on March 18th. Cave system, TK North 1, initial survey, limestone formation, appears stable, no immediate water intrusion. Proceeding to main chamber. The cave went back further than I expected. 50 feet in, it opened into a chamber the size of a school gymnasium, stalactites hanging like teeth from the ceiling. I photographed everything, checked my GPS, still getting a signal, and marked my trail with green glow sticks every 20 feet. Standard procedure. Never get lost if you follow the lights back. The chamber had 3 tunnels leading deeper. I took the widest one, the one that sloped downward. My headlamp beam reached maybe 40 feet ahead, showing smooth stone walls worn by ancient water flow. Beautiful, really. Peaceful. Just the sound of my breathing and my boots on stone. About 800 feet from the entrance, I was checking my GPS regularly. I found the bones. They were piled in a side chamber just off the main tunnel. Caribou skulls, moose vertebrae, what looked like wolf. Femurs. Lots of them, maybe 100 bones scattered across the chamber floor. At first, I thought it was a natural collection point, maybe a cave-in that trapped animals or a denning site for predators. But then I looked closer. The bones were arranged, not randomly scattered, arranged in circles. 3 perfect circles of skulls, with smaller bones radiating outward like spokes on a wheel. In the center of each circle was a pile of smaller bones, vertebrae and ribs stacked almost deliberately. I photographed everything, my hands shaking slightly. In 11 years, I'd never seen animal bones arranged like this. Animals don't make patterns, they scatter bones, they drag them, they don't build mandalas. That's when I heard the sound. Click, 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 click. It came from deeper in the cave, rhythmic and deliberate, like someone tapping stones together. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed. "This is a state survey. You're not supposed to be in here." Silence. Then the clicking started again, faster now, coming from multiple directions. The acoustics in caves can be confusing. Sounds bounce, echo, seem to come from everywhere at once. But this felt different. This felt like a response. I moved deeper, following the sound. Professional curiosity overriding common sense, which is a dangerous combination for a photographer working alone. My headlamp caught something on the cave wall ahead, marks in the limestone, shallow indentations in a soft section of rock. I stepped closer and my breath caught. Handprints, dozens of them covering a 20-foot section of wall. But the fingers were wrong. Too long. Too many of them. 6 digits on each hand, maybe 7. The prints were pressed deep into the stone, which meant they were old. Thousands of years old. Made when the limestone was softer, exposed to air and moisture. These weren't human hands. They weren't bear paws or anything else I recognized. I was photographing the prints when something moved at the edge of my light. A pale shape, humanoid but wrong, disappearing around a corner about 30 feet ahead. My heart hammered. "Hey, stop! I can see you!" I followed. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I'd spent my whole career photographing wildlife in challenging conditions. I'd been charged by bears, nearly stepped on rattlesnakes, gotten between a mother wolf and her den. You don't survive this job by being reckless, but you also don't get good photos by running away. The tunnel opened into another chamber. This one smelled different, organic, like rot and musk. My headlamp swept across the space and found a nest. Actual nest, made from animal hides stitched together with sinew, piled with moss and what looked like fresh caribou meat. Blood still dark and wet on the fur. Something was living here. Right now. Recently. I backed toward the tunnel. Time to leave. Time to report this to Fish and Game, let them send a team with weapons and radios. But when I turned around, the clicking sound was directly behind me. I spun. My headlamp illuminated something crouched on a rock ledge maybe 8 feet away. It was shaped like a human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and head. But everything else was wrong. The skin was pale, almost translucent. I could see the shapes of bones and organs moving underneath. It had no eyes. The face was flat where the eyes should be, just smooth skin stretched over the skull. The mouth hung open, and that's where the clicking came from. Rapid clicks, like a dolphin or a bat, bouncing sound waves off me, using echolocation to see. The creature tilted its head, listening to the echoes. It was emaciated, ribs showing through that translucent skin, limbs thin, like starvation. But the hands, those 6-fingered hands with long, curved claws, those were strong. Built for digging, for climbing, for killing. It was blind, hunting by sound. I froze, didn't breathe, didn't move. Every documentary I'd ever watched about predators flash through my mind. If it can't see you, stay still, don't make noise, let it lose interest. But it already knew I was there. It moved slowly off the ledge, clicking constantly, those sounds, bouncing off the walls, off my body, painting a picture of me in its mind. I could see it clearly now in my headlamp. Humanoid, but adapted for cave life over thousands of years. Long limbs for climbing. 6 fingers for better grip on stone. No eyes because eyes are useless in total darkness. Pale skin because melanin is unnecessary without sunlight. It was evolution, isolated and extreme. And it was starving. The creature moved toward me, smooth and deliberate, clicking faster. I slowly reached for my camera, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I switched on the flash and took a photo. The flash fired. Brilliant white light in total darkness. The creature shrieked, a horrible high-pitched sound that felt like needles in my ears. It recoiled, clawing at its face where eyes should have been, confused and hurt by the sudden light. I ran. Behind me, the shrieking continued, then changed to something worse, a hunting cry. The creature was chasing me. I heard its claws scraping on stone, heard it moving fast despite being blind, using those clicks to track me perfectly in the dark. I followed my glow sticks, green lights marking the path back. My lungs burned. The camera bag slammed against my hip. The creature was close. I could hear its breathing, fast and ragged, hungry. The entrance appeared ahead, a gray circle of daylight. I burst through into the morning sun and kept running, expecting any second to feel those claws on my back. But the creature stopped. I looked back and saw it crouched just inside the cave mouth, in the shadows. It wouldn't come into the light. It stayed there, that eyeless face pointed toward me, mouth still clicking softly. And I understood. It had never seen sunlight. Its species had lived in darkness for so long that sunlight would kill it, burn that pale skin, destroy it. I ran to my truck, threw the gear in the back, and drove straight to 2, the Fish and Game office in Talkeetna. The officer on duty, a woman named Sarah Chen, listened to my story with increasing skepticism. An unknown cave-dwelling species? Diana, you probably saw a deformed bear. It happens with inbreeding in isolated populations. I showed her the photos, the handprints, the bone arrangements, and one blurry photo of the creature itself, taken right before I ran. Sarah studied the images. Her expression changed. "This doesn't match any known species," she admitted. "But I'm not convinced it's not just a sick bear. Bears can look very strange when they're starving." "Bears don't echolocate," I said, "and they don't have 6 fingers." 3 days later, Fish and Game sent a team of 7, 4 biologists, 2 armed state troopers, and me as a guide. We entered the cave at dawn, all of us with weapons and radios and enough lights to turn night into day. We found the bone chamber, but the nest was gone. The hides, the meat, everything, cleared out. Fresh claw marks on the walls showed where something had dragged everything deeper into the cave system. We followed the marks. The cave continued much further than I'd explored, narrow passages leading down at steep angles. We descended for another half-mile until the tunnel opened into a massive cavern, the ceiling maybe 100 feet high. And it was full of them. I counted at least 20 creatures, adults and juveniles, smaller versions clinging to the adults' backs. They were clustered on the walls and ceiling like bats, hanging upside down, clicking softly to each other in patterns that sounded almost like language. The clicking stopped. 20 eyeless faces turned toward us. Then they moved. One of the troopers fired a warning shot. The gunshot in that enclosed space was deafening, echoing like thunder. The creatures went berserk. They attacked, shrieking, climbing down the walls at impossible speed, claws scrabbling on stone. One grabbed a biologist named James and dragged him into the darkness. His screams lasted maybe 5 seconds, then stopped. We ran, fighting our way. Back through the tunnel, another biologist went down, swarmed by 3 of them. I didn't look back, just ran, following the lights. We made it out. 4 of us survived out of 7. The state troopers sealed the cave entrance with steel bars within 24 hours, declared it off-limits due to dangerous, unstable passages. But the locals knew the truth. Carl knew. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from infected claw marks. The doctors asked what attacked me. I told them I didn't know, which was true. These creatures weren't in any taxonomy I'd ever studied. I researched for months, found references in Dena'ina oral histories to underground beings, but nothing that matched exactly. A paleontologist contacted me after seeing my photos. He theorized they might be a remnant population of Denisovans, or another archaic human species that survived the Ice Age in Alaska's deep cave systems, evolving for cave life over tens of thousands of years. Most scientists dismissed it. But I know what I saw. I still live in Talkeetna. I run a blog about cave discoveries, though most people think I'm crazy. Sometimes I go to the sealed cave entrance at night and listen. I hear clicking sounds from deep inside, sometimes shrieks. The creatures are still there. And sometimes the clicking sounds different, more frantic, more angry. Like they understand they're trapped, that humans invaded their home, sealed them inside. And I wonder if they're planning, learning, adapting. Because those steel bars will rust eventually. And when they do, something is going to come out.